We're taking a closer look at Arizona and Nevada, where the races remain too close to call. Here's the tally we have as of now. In Arizona, Joe Biden leads by a little more than 1 percentage point. This was the scene earlier at a ballot processing room in Maricopa County. The populous area includes the state's capital of Phoenix. Pro-Trump demonstrators have gathered in front of its elections department for the past 2 nights. Joe Biden is also slightly ahead in Nevada. He's up right now by just over 1.5 percentage points. The spotlight there has been on Clark County. It's home to 70% of the state's voters, including those in Las Vegas. Officials there say a final tally for the area could be completed by Sunday. For more, let's bring in Jim Nintzel. He's the executive editor of the Tucson Weekly. Welcome. Great to see you again. Thanks for being with us. So overnight, we saw Joe Biden's lead there drop slightly as more votes from Maricopa County were tallied. This is the state's largest county. So, Jim, how might that impact the final numbers?
Well, you're right. Joe Biden's lead has been steadily declining as more votes have been counted here in the state. He was up about 40,000 votes the last time I checked, and there are about 200,000 ballots, give or take, out there still left to be counted. It's a moving target because as they count them, you get fewer and fewer. And as the numbers decline, there's fewer for President Trump to catch up. Down here in Pima County, there's about 8,000 ballots left, and then about 18,000 of these so-called provisional ballots left to count. And so that's where things stand. I think we should know probably by tomorrow, or maybe even tonight if we get another ballot drop from Maricopa, where this race really is going to end up.
Well, we are expecting an update from Arizona's elections department later tonight. How likely is it that we could see finalized results out of this state before the weekend?
Well, we're not, we'll probably count most of the ballots by tomorrow. I think the holdup are what are called these provisional ballots. That's where someone goes to the poll and they cast a ballot, but maybe they got an early ballot and they lost it, or there's some other problem with their address or something along those lines. Those ballots, voters have 5 days to get down to the elections department and let people know that, yes, that was my ballot that I cast. So that extends into the weekend. So we probably won't get a final count until Monday. But these are that's going to be a very small percentage of what's left over. The bulk of it will be done probably tonight or tomorrow.
All right, Jim, I have to ask you about Sharpiegate. You knew there was going to be a question about it. So the Trump campaign has asked to join a lawsuit in Arizona that alleges voters were given Sharpies to mark their ballots and in turn were not able to cast them. Now, Arizona's Secretary of State has debunked this theory as baseless, but how are we seeing that impacting what is actually happening on the ground?
Well, it is totally baseless. It's this conspiracy that election officials handed out Sharpies to voters and that they were marking ballots that would bleed through and it would ruin the ballot and the ballot wouldn't be counted. And, here's the thing. If you fill out your ballot and you put it in and it's not processing correctly, it spits it back out and you can fill it out again. The election officials have said this is completely ridiculous. It's not happening. But it did lead to some pretty major demonstrations outside the elections counting office and elsewhere in Arizona. And there's a remarkable number of people who are buying into this Sharpiegate conspiracy. It's very unfortunate because it's completely untrue. But nonetheless, a lot of people are going to believe a lot of nonsense as I think this election draws to a conclusion.
Yeah, because a CBS News campaign reporter out there in Arizona, Alex Tin, has said that actually Sharpies were preferred because they dry faster than regular pens do. So it was actually not only baseless, but in fact, officials were encouraging people to use the Sharpies because they were quicker drying. So we'll see what happens with Sharpiegate. But I wonder more broadly here, Jim, ahead of November, how much weight did these campaigns actually put on Arizona? And how could that perhaps be making the race too close to call at this point?
Well, the polls showed Biden steadily ahead most of the time, but it was generally within the margin of error. Everybody knew Arizona was going to be a battleground state this year. Trump and his surrogates really hit Arizona a lot. The president was here several times. Vice President Pence was here several times. The Trump kids were here. They had big rallies, a lot of people without masks. On the other hand, the Biden campaign, I think Joe Biden dropped into Arizona once, and Kamala Harris dropped into Tucson once, and that was about it. But there was a lot of money obviously being spent on TV. It was the usual radio ads, the mailers, the get out the vote efforts, the campaign lit drops with the congressional and legislative campaigns. So there was definitely a huge push on both sides, but it was the Trump campaign that was on the ground a lot more than the Biden campaign was out here.
Finally, Jim, CBS News projects that Democrat Mark Kelly will defeat Arizona Republican Senator Martha McSally to take her seat. Now, the former NASA astronaut won by roughly 3 percentage points. This has long been a reliably red seat. We even saw Martha McSally appear with President Trump recently. I wonder how Democrats were able to make inroads in that contest.
Well, you're right. This is the first time since the 1950s that Democrats have held both U.S. Senate seats. And Martha McSally is actually the Republican that lost both races. She lost to Kyrsten Sinema in 2018, and she ended up in the Senate anyway because Governor Doug Ducey appointed her to the seat. Then Mark Kelly comes along, and he's really Martha McSally's worst nightmare. She was an A-10 pilot. He flew combat missions in the Gulf War and became an astronaut. So he's got her on that front. She can raise $55 million. He can raise $88 million. And in a way, this was even a grudge match. As you know, Mark Kelly's wife is Gabby Giffords. She was a Southern Arizona member of Congress. Her career was cut short by that assassination attempt. Her aide actually replaced her in Congress. Martha McSally launched her political campaign defeating that aide. So a lot of the people who were working on Mark Kelly's campaign this time out were very familiar with her having lost a race to her for Congress. And I don't want to say that it was, personal for them, but I imagine there was a great deal of satisfaction that they were the ones to bring her down. And I think a lot of that had to do with how close she got to Trump over the years. And also, Mark Kelly went and ran the same campaign as Kyrsten Sinema and said, hey, I'm going to be an independent voice. I might vote with Republicans. I might vote with Democrats. Martha McSally instead, ran right down that Trump lane 2 campaigns in a row, and it didn't work out well for her.
Yeah, you're right, though, Jim. It is so funny because you made me think of that moment in the debate, right, where at one point Mark Kelly says something about, as a pilot, you're familiar with the checklist or something, and you didn't go beyond the Trump administration didn't go beyond the first step or something along those lines, but essentially saying and telegraphing to the crowd and the audience that we are equals here, and that because of that, I know something that you should have known also. So it was a really sort of interesting dynamic. As you point out, there are a lot of kind of layers to that contest. Jim Nintzel, thank you so much for breaking that down and the presidential contest there as well. Really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.